I'd like now to take a few minutes to paint a picture of the events and circumstances of my life during the time that I was painting the Yetzirah. Immediately prior to deciding to colour the first panel, I'd been taking care of my ageing mother. Mum had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease several years earlier. Unfortunately, however, I was not able to be present when she died. I missed the final 3 months of her life. My father had always been a bully, an abusive husband and father. He'd been making it increasingly difficult for me to stay with them. Whatever I'd chosen to do with my spare time, be it composing and recording my music or working out to keep fit, he had a problem with it. I have no desire to go into great detail here. Suffice it to say that finally he did something so abominable, so lamentable and detestable, not to me, but to one of my children, that only 2 recourses of action were left open. The first would have been to have him criminally charged. The other, which I ended up taking, was to finally sever all ties with him, and thus, sadly, with my mother. One result of this is that I found myself sleeping in my car at Williamstown Beach. This I did for about a week. I must say I enjoyed the freedom, but given that my car Odie was a tiny Daihatsu, sleeping was certainly not what you'd call comfortable. It was around this time that Doc offered me the use of his garage. I'd known Doc for about 5 years at the time. 5 years or so earlier, he had generously, though perhaps foolishly, offered to help me finish my website, Mr. eWorld. I don't doubt he had no conception of what he was getting himself into. He's one of the angels I refer to in the title of this clip. His own story is both tragic and fascinating. Doc has OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It has completely ruled him for the better part of his adult life. Before I met him, I had no idea of how debilitating this disease could be. Doc was renting a house not far from Williamstown, and he suggested I park my car in the garage and sleep there, as he was concerned for my safety sleeping at the beach. I think he meant for me to sleep in my car, but once I saw the garage, after a week of sleeping in my car, I thought, man, this is perfect. I could totally set this place up as my pad. Doc told me I was welcome to use his garage for as long as I needed. He felt awfully guilty not being able to invite me into the house, but it was an OCD thing. I completely got it. Of all the people I knew who were in positions to help me, some of them millionaires in mansions, Doc was the least able to, but the most willing. Well, that day I went to the local shopping centre and bought myself a small plastic fold-out table, chair and a grey rug. Sitting by the window, recording the events that had transpired in my journal, I felt like a king. There I was, in a bare garage. Yet, after a week of living in my car, it was the very seat of luxury. The next day I bought a sofa bed, and it wasn't long before I'd moved all my stuff from various places where it had been stored. It was a strange situation. Doc's OCD has a strong element of germ phobia to it, and he goes to extremely great lengths to keep aspects of his life free from contamination. Offering me the use of his garage meant that he would never have been able to use it himself again. You see, I had foolishly revealed to him once that I had previously lived in a house where also lived a cat with feline AIDS. As a result, in Doc's mind, I was myself potentially contaminated. Consequently, Doc could not bring himself to touch anything with which I had myself been in physical contact. Apart from taking the occasional walk together, our friendship was pretty much limited to telephone conversations. Of course, this also meant that I was not able to enter the house. As the garage was not fitted out with taps or bathroom facilities, I had to learn to make do. I filled empty fruit juice bottles with water from the back tap and drove to Altona Beach to use the public showers, though often I resorted to just bathing from a bucket. Though certainly better off than most people living in third world countries, I was definitely doing it hard. By the official definition of the word, I was homeless, and would be for at least another 5 years. And this is how I was living when I began colouring Yetzirah. I'd become used to working under adverse conditions. But don't get me wrong, it certainly wasn't all bad. Living conditions were a little cramped, but I had mental and emotional freedom. That's Yetzirah rolled up, hanging from the ceiling. Each time I worked on it, I'd unravel it, painting through the night, or as the mood took me, sometimes 16 or 18 hours at a stretch. To make spare cash, I'd go busking at the local shopping mall, and that's how I met Tom and Rose. They are the other two angels I refer to in the title. Both worked at Coles. Tom approached me one day, out of the blue, and told me that he was interested in music and art. I told him that in that case I was working on something that he might like to see, and invited him around to the garage. Many good times ensued. Long hours telling stories, discussing science, history, philosophy, art and cinema. Tom and Rose impressed me tremendously with their thirst for knowledge and their kind and generous dispositions. I roped them both into helping me put together a video For the Name of the Wizard to upload onto YouTube and for Mr. eWorld. It was around this time that Tom offered to help me put Yetzirah together on his computer. Although I'd already done so on my laptop, Babbage, the images had all had to be compressed a great deal, which had resulted in pixelation and quality loss. So I treated the work I'd already done, all the hundreds of hours of it, as a practice run, and we began transferring images to Tom's computer and putting them together all over again. About this time too, I'd organised an exhibition at the local library. The idea was to exhibit what I'd done, continue painting during the exhibit as artist in residence, and hopefully sell prints of my work. I'd had 500 copies of a detail of the unicorns printed out. I had been considering for some time the idea of painting in public places. If I could double up on my time, whilst painting be promoting my work and selling prints, I could hasten the process of achieving recognition, and thus make everything substantially easier for myself, financially. To this end, I began building a vehicle to transport Yetzirah and all of my paints and gear. Perhaps, at that time in my life, I was a little mental. Perhaps I was just drinking too much wine and smoking too much weed. But I decided to build a cart trolley type contraption that, when finished, would look like a magical cart trolley type contraption from a fairy tale. I would myself be a fairy tale character. I called my creation the Magiquarium. I asked Tom if he'd like to document my attempted rise to fame and fortune, and he bought himself a new, better video camera and started filming. Sadly, the exhibition at the gallery didn't go as well as I'd hoped. A series of attempts at setting up in public places followed: Williamstown, Altona, Yarraville. I crashed a goth picnic I'd heard was taking place in the Melbourne Botanical Gardens, but no luck. Eventually, after a long series of magical misadventures, I tossed the idea of painting in public places. Not only was it not profitable, but the painting of Yetzirah itself was beginning to suffer some serious scratches. Instead, I turned my attention to collating all the bits of scribble, all the curious thoughts and observations, insights and recorded reflections I'd put down, and I organised them into a type of narrative. I intended to narrate this over some old music that, though it had originally been composed for a different project that never took flight, fitted this project perfectly. And Tom volunteered to help me put it all together on his computer. Like Doc with Mr. eWorld years before, I really think he had no idea how deep was the waterhole into which he was about to throw himself. The idea behind the clip was that I could use it as my flagship, or better, my Trojan horse. Because I had absorbed every type of influence into my art, surrealism, expressionism, impressionism, you name it, yet had gone beyond all these and evolved a style uniquely my own. Because of the grand scale and my sincere faith in Yetzirah, I decided to call the film Yetzirah, the Apotheosis of Art. The word apotheosis means to become or to be made divine. It was and is a ridiculously bold claim, so I tried to balance it by comparison with P.T. Barnum's The Greatest Show on Earth. I loved the idea of the juxtaposition, something divine, yet at the same time a freak show. That contrast between beyond highbrow with the commonest of lowbrow. You may think my pretensions over the top when I say that I believe Yetzirah the greatest single work of art ever, but I would remind you that at the end of the day, it's only art. Many revere artists, writers and actors. I do not. I revere great thinkers, philosophers, scientists, and those who give their lives in anonymity to the service of their fellows. Before the deeds of the humblest of these, doctors, teachers, saints, the greatest of all art is but scribbling in the sand.